Is the Burke County Ag Extension Agent. We're here in person in Burke County, and my portion is a little more on the beekeeping, whereas Blake and MC are touching on a few other things. MC's got some beekeeping stuff as well. I think Blake's going to focus mostly on business. So feel free to stop me at any point along the way, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you got.
Awesome. I'll go and then I'll turn it over to you, MC. My name's Blake Carter. I'm the Effingham County Ag and Natural Resources Agent. And Cliff said it right. Yeah, I'll be focusing mostly on the business side, selling honey, some other aspects to kind of think about it if you're going into that direction or if you're even thinking about that. So that'll be the last, save the best for last, right? So that'll be mine. So I'll shoot it over to MC and let her kind of kick us off.
Hey guys, my name is MC Halbrook, and I'm the Ag and Natural Resources Agent for McIntosh and Glenn counties. And I'm going to lead our first session, so I will go on and share my screen now. And you guys can see my screen. Great, thank you. Alrighty, so I wanted to begin and let you guys know that we have a special offer on the table for all of the attendees who are joining us tonight. The Chatham County Extension Office is offering a coastal Georgia beekeeping school. So if you live within driving distance of Savannah, Chatham County, it's probably going to be at the Coastal Botanical Garden, which is a little bit closer to Richmond Hill. But either way, this is an opportunity that they are offering to us. It's going to be on the third Saturday of each month, starting next month. And they will have a beginner's course in the morning, a more experienced course in the afternoon, and it's going to be $40 per session. I included Richard Evans' contact information there at the bottom if you want to reach out to him for more information. And we can put this up later at the end of the this session, so you guys have that information. However, today I'm going to talk a little bit about where have all of the bees gone. And I put a little asterisk here to say and other pollinators, because I will be talking about honeybees, but I'm also going to incorporate in some of our other pollinators as well. So some facts that we do know about bees and pollinators in general is what they supply to us. It's estimated that they're supplying, or they are pollinating, about 35% of our food crops and 75% of all flowering plants. They make up 1 out of every 3 bites of food that you eat comes from something that was pollinated by bees and other pollinators. So they have a huge impact on us and our needs as far as supplying food for us goes. They also have supplemented. In 2010, there was a study that showed their impact was $16 billion to the United States economy. That number has only grown. I just couldn't find any more recent data at the moment, but that includes the honey that they produce, but also the economical impact that they have on agriculture as a whole. And then the other flowering plants that we have, they do provide clean air, they'll filter the water and improve soil quality. So even if we aren't eating products made by these other flowering plants, they do still supply us with those necessary qualities to keep us alive. So we are seeing some decline in all of our pollinators, and we want to know this information so that we're able to understand that type of impact that they'll have when they're gone. So we'd be looking at fields like this. Without bees, there really wouldn't be food opportunities for us. So that's just a strange world to be in. So why could this happen? There are several reasons. Everybody's first instinct is to jump to pesticides, and that definitely is a contributor. But some of our other large contributors to pollinator loss and decline includes habitat loss, and then also parasites, pests, and diseases that are transferred to them. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about pesticides and understanding why this is such a negative impact. So again, I already mentioned that we largely blame pesticides. These are obviously not our target insect when we're treating our lawns or our gardens. However, they do negatively impact them because they'll be used to treat the crops that the bees will go to pollinate. And even though it's maybe an herbicide that might have been used, or we're trying to treat for insects that are doing damage to the crops, so that would still be using an insecticide. Just because the bee is not the target pest doesn't mean that it can't still be negatively impacted by those. So they do impact their population size in that way. Probably one of the bigger local issues that we see is homeowners and landscapers using herbicides on lawns. This would be to get rid of all of the weeds in your lawn, or, you know, even if you just have some of those pesky ones that you just can't quite manage on your own without using herbicides. But when you think about it, if you want to see pollinators in your landscape, if you're treating and getting rid of all of the weeds, you're not providing them any space for them to be able to do those things. So that leads into habitat loss. So those annoying weeds that we're talking about, they'll be used either as spot treatment. Pesticides will be used as spot treatment to prevent these weeds from popping up, kill weeds that are already there. We do see routine use of pesticides, herbicides, insecticides that's used in landscaping. Of course, we're seeing it in big agriculture as well. But in your home landscape, this is where you are seeing your pollinators, where you see the butterflies going across your yard and interacting, and you want that to be a beautiful space that's full of life. However, this is also a very realistic issue that a lot of homeowners are facing is these pesky weeds that can be very difficult to control. So we'll see those routine spraying, or even sometimes people will just spray without there necessarily even being that pest present. So we also have to thank these weeds for all of their flowers, because some of these will be the only thing that's blooming at that time. I know right now I have been seeing the yellow wood sorrel popping up already. So that is already available to our pollinators for them to get pollen and nectar from. So that is something that we do want to kind of maybe have a mind shift in a little bit and think about, okay, yes, it is a weed, but can it also still be helpful? And this could be something that requires even less work than you already are putting into your lawn and landscaping, because it's just going to be leaving some of those flowers available for the pollinators. However, if you must treat your lawn, that's also understandable. It depends on the goals that you have for your landscaping. So we just ask that you mow before doing your treatment. And the reason for that is it'll go through and it'll take out all of those flowers that are available to the pollinators, so that when you are applying those pesticides, the pollinators won't even be in the landscape to have it affect them. And then there also won't be food for them to come back immediately following your treatment. So that would help to keep them safe. We also see a lot of habitat loss due to land development, especially along here in the coast. And I know that Effingham, I'm sure that Burke County, you guys are seeing it too, but just as more industry is moving into these places, you're going to see more houses, apartments, shopping centers, roadways, parking lots covering the entire surface of the town. And this can really take away a lot from our pollinators. So this removes their shelter and food sources. Land development can pack in the soil, which can make it harder for you to grow any plants in an area. And so especially if it's a more urbanized area or even around a roadway where plants are not the goal at any point, then there's not going to be any of those designated areas that it's like, well, we know the person is probably going to want to plant landscaping in this area, so trying to avoid impacting the soil. But that does make it very difficult for the plants to just pop up. If they're bringing in fill dirt to the site, that could bring in seeds that are for plants that we would prefer are not growing here, are non-native or invasive plants. And then it does also just clear out that habitat. So all of the leaves and stems and things that that our bees might have been living in, that's just gone, and they don't have that structure anymore. So talking about non-native or invasive species, we always hear the buzzwords. I will say you cannot have a native that is invasive. Those two can't go together. So non-native plants would be just anything that you can buy at the store, but is not necessarily going to spread and take over your landscaping and spread into your neighbor's landscaping. Invasives are going to be the ones that you may not have ever even bought it, but because your neighbor did, or a bird ate a seed from somewhere else and pooped on your lawn, now you have it, you know, things of that nature. Invasives are really good at outcompeting our native plants. So it does make it much more challenging to have that structure there. There are also some native species that we would want to plant here, but they're actually not native to Georgia or to our area. So two of the ones that I have given as an example here, we have common milkweed, which is, as the name suggests, the common milkweed for the Midwest and north of Georgia. However, it is considered an invasive species here in Georgia. So when it is present, it will outcompete the other species that are better suited to our environment. And we won't have that biodiversity that helps kind of keep that whole ecosystem going. It's just going to be a monoculture. Tropical milkweed. This is probably the one that you're most likely to find at the stores when you are trying to buy milkweed varieties. This one is very pretty. The issue with it is that it will bloom and continue growing much, much longer than is safe for the monarchs to stay around. And it also promotes exposure to OE, which is a protozoan parasite. It basically, like when the butterflies are in their cocoon, it basically like melts them. They look kind of gooey if they ever do emerge, or they'll have deformed wings and so they can't fly, things of that nature. So if you have common milkweed, I would recommend removing it. If you have tropical milkweed, you can keep it, but you do want to cut it back about end of September, beginning of October. And then our pollinators, they have co-evolved with other native plants. And so that provides them the food, the habitat that they need in such a way that another plant would not be able to provide that to them. We can also see invasive species that are other animals that will negatively impact our bee species. I'm not going to go into great detail on these today, but certainly if you're more interested in learning about animal impact, we've got Africanized bees, especially along here in the coast. We see that a good bit coming in through the ports. Yellow-legged hornet, you guys have probably heard all about that on the news. It is one that we are carefully monitoring, especially in the Savannah area. It has spread into South Carolina, but it's been pretty self-contained. And then varroa mites, which I will talk about a little bit more in a moment. Okay, so here's what you can do to plant for pollinators if you want to encourage that type of biodiversity in your lawn, and then also add supplemental shelter and food resources for your honeybee hives. So bees are animals just like all of us. So they have the same basic needs that all of us do. And so that will include food, water, shelter, and nesting sites. So talking about food, the big things that our bees can get from our plants is going to be that nectar, pollen, and plant material. You can also supplement for your honeybees. So the image here on the left that I have is a pollen patty that is given to the bees when maybe your seasons aren't quite adding up and they just need that extra boost of pollen. You could also provide them sugar water. So the image on the right here is a container that you can use to mix sugar water in. A lot of times you'll see this on hives, especially in the winter. So when that nectar flow is low, they'll apply these to the top or the entrance of the hive. If you put it on the top, I would recommend putting an empty box on top. That way it's not getting overheated by the sun or even creating a point that could start a fire. So do pay attention to that, but there are ways that you can supplement what your bees are needing in those times when it's pretty low. Water. They definitely need to have access to water. If you have a hive and you have any neighbors that have a swimming pool, you guys are probably about to become best friends because they will call you all the time telling you about the bees that are trying to drink from their pool, drown in their pool, bothering them while they're out enjoying the pool, things of that nature. So to try to prevent that and then also provide a safer space for these bees, you can add water sources throughout your yard. So the image here on the far left, that's just an image of our honeybees drinking out of like a bird bath. That water is pretty deep, so they are stuck to the sides. And so a way to make it a little bit more accessible to them is you can add rocks and stones. Like on the image on the far right, you can see that there is some moisture in there, but the bees have a safe space to stand on with the rocks. And then the image in the middle, I found that on Facebook. I have no idea if this will be an effective method. However, what they did was they glued bottle caps to a stick, and those bottle caps will fill up with rainwater, or you could just run the garden hose over it really fast. And then that will allow little perches for those honeybees throughout. Okay, shelter and nesting sites. So our honeybees that we have are going to primarily stick to the hive. So this is going to be more for our native bees that we have. They will nest in just about anything that you have available in your yard. So brush piles, hollows of plant stems. The image there here in the middle is an example where they've burrowed into these plant stems that have been had the seed heads removed. You can see that they set up their galleries within that tube. They'll go to bare patches or undisturbed soil and nest underground. You can also build pollinator habitat through providing wood for them to dig into, more of these like tunnels, like the plant stems. This one down here is actually for a butterfly home. So that just has multiple different opportunities there for the different species and the types of nesting that they prefer. And then, of course, our native plants, we do want to shine a light on them because, again, they co-evolve with the native bees and other pollinators that we have to our area. So some of these pollinators absolutely rely on them for parts of their life cycle. And so I've given a few examples with our butterflies, with the plants that they rely on. So Gulf fritillary relies on passion vine, monarch relies on milkweed, things of that nature. So these images that I have here are images of all of those butterflies that I have listed. So if you see any of these and they're maybe your favorite to see out in the yard, if they don't have these pollinator plants anywhere nearby, then they'll prefer not to be in that area because there just isn't that food or shelter that they really need. And then I listed off a few of my favorite contenders for good pollinator plants to have out in your landscaping. There are two publications that we have that I would definitely recommend anyone who's interested in planting native to check out. They're the Eco-Friendly Garden for your herbaceous plant material, and then Selecting Trees and Shrubs. And that obviously, as the name suggests, is going to give you those woody recommendations. To look them up, you can go to Google and just type in UGA Bulletin 1483 and 1456. But I'll also make sure that that information is shared with you guys following this session. And you can also get certified. There are many different ways that you can have your lawn certified. Putting up a sign helps to encourage other people to provide that space for pollinators, but it also lets other people know why your landscaping might look a little bit more wild, and hopefully prevent other damage that might come in from somebody who doesn't quite understand what you have going on in your lawn. So a couple of examples: Homegrown National Park. That one is very, very easy. You pretty well just need to grow a couple of their recommended species, and then you get added to the map. The idea of that one is that it will create connection between all of the different homes that have these available native plants to them. So we can see kind of corridors of safe spaces for our pollinators. We have the Georgia Green Landscape Stewards. This one is done through us, through the University of Georgia system. It is more than just pollinators. You learn how to have a green landscape. So that it does include other environmentally friendly practices to implement. There are educational components to it, and a self-score, and you need to reach a self-score of 70 in order to have a certified landscape. And then the Xerces Society also has the pollinator habitat sign that you could look into. But there are, honestly, there's so many different ones. These are just probably my 3 most common ones that I recommend. Okay, and then the last one that we talked about is parasites, pests, and diseases. So I'm not going to get too in the weeds on these, but I do have 4 of our most I'll just say what it says, worst pests in the hive. These are not necessarily the 4 that you are going to deal with most often, but they are ones that we repeatedly as extension agents are hearing and talking about. This is especially true for me. Up in Burke and Effingham and beyond, you guys might have different pests that are more common. So the first one is going to be our wax moths. These are natural scavengers. Really, their goal is to go in and clean out that honeycomb. So they do work together with bees in nature. In our setting, we're not going to really have time where the bees aren't on a frame. So when these wax moths do come in, that can be an issue, and that they'll be consuming the wax out from underneath the bees. So the best way is going to be keeping your equipment clean. If there are frames that don't have any bees or brood or honey on it, if you're just storing them, try to store them in a safer place where they hopefully will not be as available to wax moths. And then if you were to open your hive and you see these cocoons or this silk-like webbing as it's gone through a frame, then you know you have an issue there. So you want to make sure that you get all of that cleaned out really well. Small hive beetles, they also scavenge. They'll attack weak colonies as well. They are pretty tiny. You can see here that they're only about a little less than 6 millimeters long. However, they are still easy to see with the naked eye, so you'll know if you're having any issues with the small hive beetles. Again, you want to keep all of your equipment clean, and there are different traps that you can set up to check to see if you do have issues with hive beetles, but also they will fall into the traps and they'll die and eventually work towards decreasing their population size. There are also some predatory nematodes here. You can treat the soil around your hive because that is where the beetles will go to reproduce. So if you treat the soil around the hive, then ideally it will prevent them from being able to have that second generation. And so this is an image of one up close from the top, but here you can see a pretty tremendous infestation. But compared to the honeybee size, it's still pretty easy to see them. Honeybees will run them out of the hive. So that is something to keep an eye out for. If they're not doing that, then that might be a sign of decline within the hive, or even that you just have an unhygienic hive. Okay, so varroa mites, these are parasites that our bees will have attacking them. The number that we look for is if you're seeing about 2 to 5 mites per 100 bees, that's when you know you have a real issue and you want to treat for it. There are several different ways you can go about treating it. I have listed here some of our more chemical recommendations. You can also apply bottom screens to keep them out of, if you have multiple different boxes, you could apply it so that they're only in the bottom box. You can sacrifice drone brood to them because they actually really prefer the drones. However, if you do have an untreated infestation, it can completely kill off your hive in 1 to 2 years. And then here we have a honeybee with the mite right here. And then we have a larva with the mites covering it all over. So definitely much smaller, a little harder to see than those small hive beetles, but you could still see that with your naked eye. And then the last one that I'm going to talk about today is going to be American foul brood. This is a bacterial disease. If you suspect that you have it, you need to contact the Georgia Department of Agriculture. They will come out and inspect your hive to see if that is in fact what you have. And then they will cull the hive. They'll burn it to get rid of this bacteria so that hopefully it won't spread to any of your other hives or any of your neighbors' hives. So some of the signs you can look for to keep an eye out on, it will basically melt the pupa as it's in the cells. You can see this one has stuck its tongue out. That's a pretty good sign that it's not doing good. It probably has American foul brood. And then if you look at, if you were to like tilt the frame so you can get the sunlight going right down into it, you'll see that it's just going to be black and scaly, which is where the pupa has dried and hardened against the cell. So quite a sad little slide to leave on. However, that is my presentation. So I will open it up for a couple of questions if anybody has any right now.
And if you're online, please utilize the chat box, or if you would like to unmute yourself, you can, but please feel free to use the chat box to send in some questions.
Awesome. Alrighty then. Well, I will hand the microphone over, so to speak, to Cliff Collins.
Hey, MC, hold on just a second.
She said something about starting a fire in the hive, and I didn't quite catch what she said about that.
MC, the question is in regards to your statement when you were talking about feeding the bees and starting the fire. I think you were referring to like the sunlight hitting the jar, but could you elaborate a little bit?
Yes, great question. Yeah, so that would be that it's a glass jar, it's got water in it. It would be like when you take a magnifying glass and you can create a pinpoint of light. So that would be what it would cause.
Hey, MC, we got a few on the chat. So the first one, how often do you see American foul brood?
So that one is a little less common. We do have recommendations for a routine treatment for that one because it does mean the death of that hive, either immediately if the Department of Ag has to do, and excuse me, it could kill them either by just killing off all of the bees, or it could be because there already is a decline and it needs to be removed from the environment.
Okay, and then kind of the same thing was the prevalence of the foul brood. You kind of just touched on that a little bit. And then the next one here, you mentioned using a screen, I think for mites. Would you advise using that when starting a colony to prevent them, or what would you suggest?
That definitely could be used from the jump. Honestly, I think, Cliff, do you have any good suggestions on prevention for small hive beetle?
Yeah, so I think that what you may have been referring to was using the screen bottom boards with a sticky board on the bottom to catch the small hive beetles as they fall through, and then they're stuck like a glue trap for a mouse.
Yes.
And then I'll talk a little bit more about traps and beetle oil and that sort of thing when I get to that point in my presentation.
Awesome. That's all the questions we have in the chat box. As we go through our next speaker, which is Cliff, feel free to, if he says something and you want to write the question, go ahead and put it in the chat box, and then we'll come back and go back over those at the end of his presentation. So if there's nothing else, MC, Cliff, I guess we'll let Cliff take it away.
Cliff, I got one for you.
All right.
So if we get stuck with one of these pest infestations and it gets to be too much to handle, can we just clean the equipment and reuse it, or do we need to toss it and get used them?
Which pest are you talking about? That depends.
I was thinking about like with the wax moth infestation and the beetle, I don't know much about the money.
Yeah, so the question is, if you get a pest infestation, can you just clean the equipment and go back to using it, or do you have to toss it? So in most instances with wax moths, small hive beetles, and varroa mites, you can continue to use the equipment after you do one of a couple different methods. And so with small hive beetles, if you freeze the frames for 24 hours, then all of those will be dead. Same thing with the wax moths, but with the wax moths, you need to freeze or potentially burn. That's your choice. But like, when I say burn, I mean like run just a torch over it. Don't set it on fire. The corners of things just to kill what's on there, and then you can go back to using it as long as the wax moth didn't eat all the way through the box or the frame or what have you. And then with varroa mites, they're really more infesting the bees than the equipment itself. Okay, let me see if I can make this do the just show how we need to see it in here. All right, well, I guess that's just the view we'll have here. And then Blake MC, is that what, are y'all seeing the full screen?
We see the presenter view. We can see the notes and everything. Is that the same thing you are seeing on your end?
Yeah, that's not what I wanted to see though.
Click that. Yeah, click that. See if that helps you.
Which one?
The three little dots. See if that lets you change it out of presenter mode. There you go.
Nice. It just went away.
There you go.
Oh, okay. So what's on my computer and what's up there is different. All right, cool. And it's not flipping through. It's changing on my computer, but not on the screen. Bear with me. Y'all, where did it go?
I'm so glad you're better at beekeeping than you are with presentations.
I'm not great with this, as we all are well aware. So it's on my computer screen, but it's not on the projector screen. Do y'all see it?
Yeah, we see it. I mean, I'm seeing your PowerPoint screen right now.
I just want to say that before y'all got here, MC and I did this and it worked. Okay. Blake, are y'all good now?
Yeah, we'll just rock and roll with it.
Okay, cool. So, first I want to start off with the basics of beekeeping. And so in a beehive, you have a queen bee, a worker bee, and a drone. Queen bee determines everything about the hive. She lays the eggs, she controls the temperament. Without the queen, the hive fails. In each hive, you should have one queen. There are a few anomalies where you get a second queen. Again, that's an anomaly. It doesn't happen super often. We'll talk a little bit about what the difference is in the bees themselves here in just a second. So a worker bee is all of the female bees in the hive that are not the queen bee. And so they do all of the jobs in the hive with the exception of laying the fertilized eggs and mating with new queens. And then the drone is the male bee. Their only job is to go outside the hive and mate with other bees. All right, so the egg to bee path, we start out and all the eggs are laid and the eggs actually hatch after 3 days. So hatching and emerging are two different things. On the third day, the egg goes from this grain of rice looking thing that you see up there underneath the egg to bee path. And then it turns into basically a letter C or a comma, whatever you want to call it. And then from there, on day 8, the cells become capped. And eventually, your frame starts to look like this bottom right picture. And so then the differences occur of when the eggs actually emerge, the bees emerge out of the cell. And so for the worker bee, it's 21 days. For the queen bee, it's 16 days. And for the drone bee, it's 24 days. So the queen bee, even though she is much larger, is significantly less time from the time the egg is laid to the time the queen emerges from the cell. All right, so I wanted to kind of go over the parts of a hive so that everybody knows what we're talking about. So on every hive, this is just your standard beehive. You have an outer lid. These are called telescoping lids. With that hive outer cover, outer lid, whatever you want to call it. You can also have migratory lids, which are more or less for shipping bees. So they're a little less common in our part of the state. Inner lid serves multiple purposes. Usually made out of wood, has a hole in the center. A lot of the time you have a deeper portion or you can flip it over and have a flat portion. So in the wintertime, flip it upside down and you can pour sugar, pollen patties, whatever on the inside of the hive. A lot of them also have a bee escape so that there's a top escape out of the top of the hive. You can use the hole in the center of this hive to feed bees. So a little while ago, Mary Claire, MC, was talking about using a mason jar on top of the hive. So when this is sitting here, you can take your mason jar, flip it upside down with some holes in the lid, and just let it drip over top of this hole. The bees can get the sugar water. She said that you want to place a box around it. So at that point, you would have another box sitting on top of this, and then your lid up here. That keeps the sunlight from hitting it and potentially starting a fire shoot or burn too. Good enough. All right. So just for everyone's knowledge, this is the frame. Deep frame. What you see on here is drawn cone. Not sure the experience level in the room, so I want to make sure I went over all of that. Deep hive body. Okay. If you're running honey supers, that goes up on top and shallower than this significantly. So in the top, you've got the ridges for the frame to sit down in. And then your bottom board. You can have a strength bottom board, you can have a solid bottom board. Your choice, your prerogative. Let me grab one thing. So entrance reducer would fit there underneath the box, allow you to close off or reduce down your entrances. All right, so I didn't have with me a honey super to show you that. So that would just sit up on top. There would be a queen excluder, that's your choice, to go between the hive body and the honey super. The queen excluder does just that. It keeps the queen out of your honey super where you're going to produce honey, so that you don't have eggs in your honey. Questions about that? Yes.
When you want to use the excluder, or the, I'm sorry, the entrance reducer, you have a larger opening and a smaller opening.
Right.
When do you want to use that?
So the only time that I would use the absolute smallest opening, is if the hive is really struggling. So that you got less area for the bees to have to guard to keep other bees from rotting them out. If we're just in a time that there's not a lot of food available, you can use this side. Or in the summertime or springtime, you can take this out all the way. This is not required. And in the summer when it's good and hot, you want as much airflow through there as possible. So remove these at that point in time.
How many frames fit into the box?
So that depends on what size box you have. Commonly, you have an 8 and a 8 and a 10 frame. And a nuke box, which we'll talk about in a minute, is 5 frames. So this is a 10 frame box.
Hey, Cliff, would you mind repeating the questions when they ask them on your end so everybody can hear them on this end?
I'm sorry, yes. So that question was how many frames fit inside the box? And then the first question was when to use the entrance reducer on which setting or which spacing. All right, are we good? One of them.
When you were talking to brood chamber,
Mm-hmm.
back in the mid-80s, I used to run bees in Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
Always ran 2 boxes.
Right.
I don't see that down here.
So the question is in regards to running double deep versus single deep brood chambers. That is strictly your choice. Our winters are relatively mild and don't have to have that extra brood box in the wintertime. Personally, I don't like to run double deep brood chambers because it's more frames to go through, but that's my personal preference and you're welcome to do however you want to. It does make it easy for splitting and multiplying your hive set. All right, so getting started. My first point is always to be discreet. MC mentioned your neighbor and the pool. Just because you want bees does not mean that your neighbor wants bees. And this might be a little less of a problem in Burke County than it probably is in some of the other counties. However, your neighbors don't always want bees. So, not everybody needs to know you have bees. Your Facebook page doesn't necessarily need to know that you have bees. If you choose to put them out there, so be it, but be prepared. I have made a joke before of, did you see the little GPS tracker on the bee? Well, no. Okay. Well, my bees have GPS trackers. Okay. Avoiding low spots in the yard. Cooler temperatures, higher humidity is the biggest problem with lower spots in the yard. So try to pick a spot that's not right down the edge of the creek. Also, you want it in full sun. And a lot of the time, low spots in full sun don't always occur in the same place. If you're in an area with super high winds or bears, that's something you need to think about. Where we are here, we don't really have to worry about bears too much. And our high winds occur when we have Hurricane Helene's. Again, place it in the full sun and not everyone wants bees. So most important thing, find a local bee club, find a mentor within the bee club, attend their meetings. We have one here in Burke County. I know that much. And I know that there's some down around the coast as well. All right, so you can purchase bees one of a couple ways. Now, these prices are average prices. And some of these I gave a good range for because it's very drastically different. Anyways, so first of all, be wary of scams. For some reason, Facebook groups, the online forums, people are scamming beekeepers left and right. Do not send somebody money for bees until you physically see the bees and know that you can get them. So always start with 2 hives. If you get down to, let's say, August or September, and you lose a queen, what are you going to do because you can't get a queen from Queen supplier is usually in September, okay? If you've got another hive, you can take brood out of one hive and move it to another. There's a long list of reasons. Don't start with one hive. Next, you can buy a package of bees, which a package of bees is a 3-pound box. It's a big cricket box is the best way for me to explain it. It does not come with any frames. It does not come with any brood. The queen does not necessarily go with that group of bees. Packages are a great way to get started. However, they require a lot of very intensive work. And if you're not going to devote a whole lot of time and effort into it, I don't encourage you to start with a package. Nucleus colony or nuke. Submittal range pricing. The earlier you order them, the cheaper they are. The later into the season that you go, the more expensive they're going to be. So it is a fast start to grow a hive quickly. When you buy a nuke, it is usually in a wooden box or plastic box. There are some cardboard type boxes now. So it comes with 5 frames, a queen that is laying eggs, a couple frames of brood, a frame of honey. That's hypothetical. That's what it should come with anyways. That queen is laying eggs. She's accustomed to that colony of bees. You have bought a hive when you buy a nuke. It is just a smaller version. You take this box and cut it in half. You have a 5-frame nuke. Okay? It's all the components, the smaller version. So when you buy a nuke, you get it and you move the frames over to this box. And very shortly, you have a full 10-frame box of these. All right, you can also buy a fully established colony. It's going to cost you the most amount of money out of all the options. They're ready to make honey. If you're looking for a real quick way to get started, that's for you. However, I encourage all new beekeepers to start with a nuke. The reason for that is I think it's very beneficial for new beekeepers to see the growth from 5 frames to 10 frames. That helps you understand the process of beekeeping. Questions on that? Yes, ma'am.
What do you mean by season? Spring, fall?
So the question is, when I said season, what do I mean by season? So beekeeping season, did I put it in this slide? No, I did not. When you can buy bees is what I really meant. So you can start picking up packages probably as early to mid-March. A little earlier, a little later, depending on the supplier. And that'll run through May, maybe June. With nukes, you can usually start picking them up around the 1st of April. And that will run from April to probably July-ish, give or take, depending on the supplier. And then established colony, depending on who you find, you can probably pick up an established colony about any time of the year. The price is just going to vary at that point. All right, so moving newly purchased bees. I think this is extremely important. You don't need to show up to a bee supply place to pick up a fully established colony of bees in an SUV. It's not going to end up great for you. All right, so packages. They should be totally self-contained. There should not be anything that you really have to do to transport a package of bees. Don't place them in the bed of the truck. They probably won't be alive when you get home unless you've got a bed cover. There may be a few stragglers, like a couple, 2 or 3. When you pick up a package, they're likely not coming out of your package. They're likely just clinging on from wherever you picked it up from. All right, nukes. So nukes is a hive. It's just a smaller version. So they should be closed with a screen covering the entrance. You're going to want to move them late in the evening or early in the morning so that you get all the foragers, so that you don't leave, a good many bees behind. Now, with nukes, a nuke is a hive, as I said. It's just a smaller version. As you see, all of these pieces come apart. So even though they fit tightly together, a bee getting out of this box is kind of like a mouse getting into your house. It doesn't matter how tightly sealed up you think it is, they can get out. So you're riding down the road in your SUV, you've got this nuke box sitting on the back seat, and somebody pulls out in front of you, an 18-wheeler pulls out in front of you, and you slam on brakes. You don't hit the 18-wheeler, but you get 20,000 bees released inside the SUV with you. Okay? So think through that. Wrap the nuke box with a ratchet strap, not a bungee cord, not a pull strap, a ratchet strap. They make nuke transport bags. All it is a glorified mesh laundry bag. Okay, you can go to Walmart and get one in the laundry department. Okay, if you do that and put the nuke inside of the laundry bag, if something happens and the bees go flying, they're still contained just inside of the bag. Okay, think through that. You can put that in the bed of the truck, just try not to put the entrance to way that it's facing the wind. Full hive should always be moved in the bed of a truck or on a trailer. Get somebody to help you move it. Again, it should be closed with a screen or some other mechanism. Pool noodles work great to close things up. You cut them down the middle, slice them to the length. They've got that little hole in the center that becomes the letter U, and it just fits right underneath and closes it up. That works great too. Same thing as the nukes, but don't put it inside of a vehicle. Make sure that your site is set up before you bring them home. You don't need to get home with a box full of bees that are already angry because they jostle around in your vehicle. Trying to figure out where you're going to put them, what are you going to set them on, all that sort of stuff. For the record, concrete blocks make great hive stands. They're cheap and they move easily.
Is
All right.
the full hive, a full box like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. That slide is out of order. Anyways, so the proper use of a lit smoker will benefit you greatly in beekeeping. It'll minimize stings and keep beekeeping much more enjoyable. So, one of the hardest things for a beekeeper that's starting out is lighting a smoker. Now, I'm going to show you a cheating tool. And I meant to bring a smoker with me and I forgot it. This is a cheating tool, okay? This works much better than this, all right? Save yourself a bunch of hassle. I've had this one, I don't know, 3 years or so, and it's still on the same tank. Works great. All right, so when you light your smoker, remember that air is forced in through the bottom of the chamber. So if you stuff everything and hard pack it to the bottom, there's no air getting to the top. Also, if you pack it slam full and light the top, fire burns up, the air's coming from the bottom, which is pushing the fire up. So you're not actually burning anything down underneath. So, what's the most readily available smoker fuel? Pine straw. Suggestion is to get you some pine straw, whether you buy a bale of it or whether you go rake it up. Get you some pine straw, put it in a tub, like a plastic Rubbermaid tub, and put it somewhere to keep it dry. That way you've always got a supply of dry fuel ready to go, even if you need to go in your hive on a rainy day. As much as that's not a great situation, you can still light a smoker if you have dry pine straw. Once your smoker's lit, stuff a little bit more fuel on top. Don't cram it down super far. 1 to 2 puffs, you should be good to go. You don't have to smoke the bees to the point of like house fire. So keep in mind, you can change the flavor of honey to an extent with too much smoke. The other thing that can happen is when you smoke bees, when you push smoke into the hive, the bees go to eating honey, okay? which is fine for them to go eat just a little bit of honey. However, you don't want them to just chow down on honey for the next 4 hours because you just want to do a quick look-see into the hive. So, couple puffs of smoke, you're good. If the bees get testy, give them a couple more puffs of smoke, but don't overload them. You can also use the smoker to get the bees away from the corners of the hive and the top of the lid when you go to close it, so that you don't create mass casualties. One thing that I have done in the past is kept up with leftover toilet paper rolls and taken and stuffed pine straw down inside the toilet paper roll with like a pine stick or something. Then you can just light the bottom of that, toss that into the smoker, and you're good to go for 20 or 30 minutes. If you've got a bigger smoker, you can put 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of them in there at a time. Pine cones work great. Once you get it going too, they burn a little longer than the pine straw itself. All right, average calendar in Georgia. So I put this together because everybody always asks me. I pulled this information from the UGAB lab and some information on U.S. Department of Ag site. This is just an average calendar. Temperatures change, weather patterns make things different, just a ballpark figure. So right now, you should be feeding sugar syrup. Your queen should be beginning to lay eggs depending upon where you are. Pollen patties will help boost the population quickly. If we get some warm days, we can start oxalic acid treatments. And that's talking about varroa mites, and I'll get to that in just a second. All right, mid-February, you're still here. Your hives are getting ready for a detailed inspection. However, don't do that until it is at least 50 degrees, preferably a little bit warmer than that. When you pull that frame out and you've got uncapped brood and it's cold, you're going to chill the brood and have dead brood, okay? We're in a time right now where you can't afford to lose brood. So in February, if it's not good and warm, don't pull those frames out of the hive. But it is a great time to start looking at the arrangement of brood patterns, disease symptoms, less than average brood quantities. So now is the time to start just thinking, okay, I need to look at that hive a little closer next month to see if I'm replacing that queen. March, if requeening is necessary, queens are usually becoming available in March, okay? That's dependent upon weather. That's just a decision you'll have to make, looking at your brood patterns, looking at disease symptoms, all of that, whether or not you think that hive needs requeening. I like to have a new queen every 2 years. She can live longer than that. So, come April, your strong hive should be ready for honey supers. If it's first year hives, especially if it was a package, you're not putting honey supers on. If it was a nuke, maybe, but not in April. Come May, the rest of your hive should be getting to the strength point if they didn't get supered in April to get supers in May. Depending upon where you are, depends upon whether or not you're going to have a nectar flow in June to make it worth that. So, towards the latter part of summer, depending upon how far our nectar flow goes, and when I say nectar flow, I'm talking about things blooming, the temperature, the rainfall, all of those things play into whether or not that nectar flow is going to continue through the summer. You're going to start pulling honey supers. You're going to leave some honey for the bees. So I say that because what happens in Georgia in August and September is super hot, super dry. What doesn't happen when it's super hot and super dry? There's nothing blooming. If there's nothing blooming, there's no nectar flow. So if you pull all of their honey, then you need to be feeding sugar water in that time that we're going to call a dearth. Meaning there's no nectar flow, there's nothing blooming. If not, you'll see population decline in the middle of what you thought was summer. You would think, oh, the only problem we're going to have is in winter. We have as much problem in August, September as we do in winter. All right, and fall, if the honey stores are low in the hive after pulling some supers, you want to feed a heavy syrup. And all that means is sugar to water ratio. So, a guide, 70 to 100 pounds. You pick up your hive in the fall, it should feel to you to be 70 to 100 pounds to go in the winter. Some say it's a little heavy, but it should get you through winter. Yes,
Is that just your deep?
that's whatever you have on the hive.
Usually run a deep and a super, right?
Not in winter, I don't, unless I've got enough in a super to leave it. So, if you feed the heavy syrup 2 to 1, and you got a super on there, you might can feed enough 2 to 1 for them to pack that super full of 2 to 1 and then leave that. If that super's empty, then you don't want to leave it for them to have to guard that space. I guess y'all on Zoom didn't hear the question. The question was, when I was talking about the weight, is that just the deep or is that the deep and the honey super? So. All right, varroa mite treatment. If you have bees, you're going to have mites. So it's a controversial topic, and I'm going to stand on the side of treating for mites. So November to January, oxalic acid vaporizer. You're going to do 3 treatments 7 days apart. Okay, oxalic acid. In the long run, it's cheap and it's easy. So you can buy expensive or cheap vaporizers. And so when I say a vaporizer, it's a wand about this long with some sort of power attached to it. So mine is 12 volt. I hook a lawnmower battery to it. I've got it inside a milk crate, which is strapped to a hand truck, and I just roll that along in front of my house. They now have cordless, I guess is the word you call it. Oxalic acid vaporizers, they're much more expensive, but all you have to carry around is something you can hold in one hand. Very nifty. So when you use oxalic acid, you need to wear a respirator. I don't mean a hospital mask. I don't mean your shirt over your nose. I mean a respirator. Harbor Freight sells them all day long. They're not super expensive. Oxalic acid vapor will crystallize inside your lungs. So January to April, before your honey supers, you're going to run Formic Pro, Mitoid Quick Strips, that active ingredient. Those are going to be temperature dependent. If you choose to run honey supers, if you choose to treat for mites while you run honey super, you can use HopGuard. You can now, according to the FDA, use oxalic acid. That's your choice. July to October is crucial for varroa mite treatment. The bees that are in your box in the late summer, early fall are the bees that are going to carry you through till springtime. Okay? So you've got to treat the mites that time of the year, or else your population is going to decline so heavily your hive might not make it through winter. All right, bearding on the hive body. Is it a bad thing? Not necessarily. It's not swarming. Please know the difference. It just means that your bees are hot. There's a lot of bees in the box and they're hot. So this is what it looks like when the bees beard up. Swarming. This is a swarm. So in a swarm, a third of the colony leaves, give or take. 2/3 of the colony stays. The old queen goes with the swarm. The hive should have a new queen when that swarm leaves the box. In that instance, you can grab the swarm, put them in a new box, and go on about your merry life, and they should stay hypothetically. So what is the difference between swarming and absconding? When a hive swarms, you still have bees in the box. When a hive absconds, you don't have any bees in the box, not even dead bees. Why do bottom boards make a difference? So a lot of the time, you will end up with swarms because they got too hot and they cannot regulate their own temperature. So in the instance that we just saw of the bearding, they couldn't regulate their temperature by bearding. So they left. If you use a screen bottom board, they are more likely to regulate their temperature. Here in central to south Georgia, you can pretty much use a screen bottom board year round. We don't get too terribly cold most of the time. All right, feeding bees. You can feed bees internally or externally. Externally is asking for issues, such as robbing. This bottom picture is a hive top feeder. It just fits down inside of a shallow super, and the bees can climb up the wire from the inside and access the sugar water. That top right picture is an internal frame feeder. It just fits down in the place of 1 or 2 frames, and you can buy different sizes, different capacities. And the top left picture is a Boardman feeder. It can cause issues with robbing, among other things. So we typically encourage internal feeding, not external feeding. All right. So what questions do you have for me?
Are carpenter bees, a threat to the hive I'm trying to keep, or are they gonna fight the territory if they were that negative?
No. The question was carpenter bees. Fighting for territory. I'm struggling to get y'all back up on the screen. All right, there we go. Okay, I got a couple other questions here. Yes, sir.
Corn syrup taboo.
It's not totally natural.
Is it true that it reduces the bee life by a third?
I can't say for sure on that, but I will be glad to look it up if you'll give some contact. Okay.
So it produces, when you overheat the sugar, it produces a hydroxymethyl furfural, and that disrupts the digestive tract.
So those of you on Zoom, did y'all hear the question? Okay. Anything else here? All right.
We currently don't have these, but we're thinking about getting them.
Okay.
We live in a residential neighborhood. That's not too close. You mentioned things like swarms and all this stuff. Is there a danger at all to having bees in a residential area?
So the question is there a danger of having bees in a residential area? There's a lot of things that depend upon that. There's not a straightforward answer. The short answer is that you should be able to keep bees just about anywhere that you want to. The long answer is that depending upon how close your neighbors are and which way you face the hive and what your neighbors have out in their yard is going to determine all sorts of things. If your houses are so close together that all you can do is walk between them and your neighbor's allergic to honeybees, I don't encourage you to put bees there. If you've got 1+ acres or close to that, you could get away with 2 hives probably. Just be careful.
Hey Cliff, when in a case like that, is there any tips on getting, like maybe putting your hive at another location, working with farmers, anything like that? Are there any tips and tricks for that?
Yeah, Blake, thank you for bringing that up because that didn't even cross my mind. But yes, so there are often people that would love for you to bring your hive and put on their property. And a lot of the time, if you're willing to swap them a couple jars of honey a year, that goes perfectly fine. That's not really pollination services. That's really just you utilizing someone else's land. And so, you know, you can usually find somebody within a couple mile radius most of the time that would be more than happy for you to do that. All right, I got another question about there in the back.
If they're too cold, do they freeze?
Do you need a heater?
The question is it ever too cold or do bees freeze? So the job of bees is to keep the inside of the hive over 90 degrees year round, but not too terribly hot at the same time. Now, in the instance of you are in Georgia and you are a good beekeeper that's a beekeeper and not a bee haver, meaning that you keep bees and you go through winter with a pretty heavy colony of bees, your bees should be able to sustain Georgia winters without a whole lot of extra something. They do make quilted blankets for beehives, and a lot of people up north use them. I do know that when we got some snow the other day, people went and some people draped blankets over their eyes. The other thing is that snow can, in the instance that you used a solid bottom board, not a string like this one, snow can block the entrance and they can suffocate. But most of the time, the bees don't freeze in Georgia, they starve because they won't break cluster to go eat. So they cluster inside the hive, and a lot of times they won't break that cluster to go eat. I hope that answered your question.
So, I'm on them, I'm thinking about getting into these,
Mhm.
there's nothing going on. So if you get, if I go get this new.
So, actually, there are some fields. So the question was, there's nothing blooming right now, and I want to go get some bees. What's the deal? So we have quite a bit of henbit currently blooming on crop fields, which is the low growing purple flower. A lot of people call it a weed. Beekeepers like it. Purple dead nettle is also blooming now, as well as maples are starting. So there are a few things, but you can also supplement sugar water. If you go get a nuke now, there should be enough nutrients in the nuke to sustain, but it's really not quite the time of year to even be able to pick up a nuke anyways. So I will answer the rest of questions here in person after the Zoom. Is there anything else that we need to touch on before we switch it to you, Blake? Is there any questions there that I need to hit?
No, I think that's all. I didn't see any come up in the chat. But at the end, if you have any extra questions for Cliff or MC, please feel free to keep asking them in the chat. I know Cliff and MC will keep monitoring that. And same in person, Cliff. If there's folks that got questions, just I'm sure everybody at the group would love to hear them. So we can address those at the end. So I guess I'll take over and kind of take us home before we do some question and final questions here. Let me see if I can make mine work. Let's see. What do y'all see? You see note screen or regular?
You can see your presentation.
Cool. Good. That's what I like to hear. All right. So I'm gonna close this out, and I really, when I was thinking about how I could fit into this, I'll just be honest with y'all because I think honesty is good. I don't have beehives. Out of all the speakers, MC and Cliff, I'm the one that does not have bees himself. But one thing that I really, my specialty area is in agribusiness and marketing and business planning specifically. So I really wanted to bring some of that and relate it to beekeeping and specifically honey production. So I really want to try to help y'all recoup some of this cost for beekeeping. That's going to be where I really shine here. So even if you're not wanting to make a full-on business out of this, I'm going to offer some food for thought on how you can differentiate yourself from other honey producers in your area. And if you have questions, please feel free to use the chat online. And then Cliff, if you could just kind of keep some, if any of them in person have questions till the end, that would be great. So let's get the ball rolling here. Before we get to the meat of the talk, I wanted to bring to light the elephant in the room. For those that are not beekeepers or just starting, this hobby can be rewarding. It's very rewarding, but it does have a cost to start and maintain. Oklahoma State recently released a budget. So if y'all are looking at becoming beekeepers for the first time and kind of looking at your budget and how much money it's going to cost, Oklahoma State has a really good tool. So if you just typed in Oklahoma State beekeeping budget, it comes up. It's an Excel file that'll help you kind of monitor your costs. It also talks about, it also helps you kind of calculate return on investment if you do honey production, things like that. But based on their estimated cost, and Cliff kind of broke it down. I like how he broke it down from basically the most work involved to the least amount. And he was a little bit lower than their average. So their part of the world is probably a little higher. But their estimated budget cost is around $458 to start to kind of play with, give or take 520. So anywhere in that 450 to 520 range by the end of the year to get kind of just started. It's kind of the startup cost that they're going off of. And that is what that's without any setbacks. And if y'all are new to agriculture, I'll have some news for you. There's going to be setbacks. All right. We're going to have random snowstorms and then turn around and have 80-degree weather. All right. That's just what we deal with down in Georgia. All right. So it's great, but there is problems. So I'm not here to teach y'all, take y'all to the land of the milk and honey, where you get rich off the honey. But I do want to provide some thoughts and the directions for those that may want to get some money back off that honey that you're producing. So we're going to start by going into where my head always goes when it comes to agriculture products, right? So it goes straight to legal requirements because I'm worried that I'm doing something wrong and I don't want to get in trouble. So this can be very intimidating, especially if you're like, whoa, I don't even know if I want to sell honey. And now you're telling me there's all these laws and licenses. Well, good news is it's not as overwhelming as other areas, other sectors, other things that you're trying to sell. This one's not as bad. It's pretty cut and dry. Georgia beekeepers are not required to obtain a food sales establishment license if they process and retail their own honey on their own premises on a door-to-door retail route or at an established place of business owned and managed by the producer, and the honey is directly sold to end consumer. I really want y'all to remember that. A lot of times it can get really complicated reading through everything, but at the end of the day, if you are producing it on your property and it's going directly to end consumer, then you don't have to worry about a license. Food sales establishment license. Now, where it gets a little funky is, do you need a cottage food license? That's a question that gets asked. Technically, when I asked Georgia Department of Ag this because I was curious myself when it comes to this, because they don't really give good, clear instructions. But technically, you don't have to have a cottage food license to sell honey that's not further processed. Right? So if you're just doing whipping just to the point where you can sell it, or if you have raw honey, that's fine. The moment you start adding or changing the honey, that's where you start getting into the cottage food license. If you're unsure, Georgia Department of Ag does have a really good, you can reach out to them. Or if you're thinking about going into that next step where you're wanting to do something funky with your honey, maybe flavoring it or something like that, going ahead and get those balls rolling on a cottage food license isn't a bad idea. It just goes ahead and makes sure that your space is clean and safe to produce in. So it's totally fine either way you want to look at it. But the good news is if you're just starting out and you've got a budget, you're trying to crunch the numbers, you don't necessarily have to have licensing. So that's good. Now, for everyone else that produces honey that's either bulk, retail, wholesale, you do have to obtain a food sales establishment license through the Georgia Department of Agriculture. And I do have the link. Let me see if I can copy it and I'll throw it in the chat. Let me see if I can do that. It's not letting me copy and paste, but I'll send y'all a link when we send out the resources for this. I'll send the link with it, but it's basic honey requirements. If you go to Georgia Department of Ag's website, you'll be able to find it pretty easily. But it's basic requirements for honey producers. It's super easy to look at, to kind of follow. And believe it or not, I don't know if y'all look at Georgia Department of Ag's website, but this one's probably the most cut and dry and easiest to understand. So good job for being a beekeeper because it makes things easier for you. All right, so we're going to kind of continue on. That's kind of the legal requirements. Now we're going to get into more of the label requirement side, and I'm just going to briefly touch on this. Georgia Department of Ag does outline a basic food label. Okay, technically, you don't have to have like everything you're going to see in a supermarket on a label for when you're selling direct to consumer. Technically, you could just literally not even have a label at all. But what's good about having a label is it helps with traceability. It does also help with any kind of issues with the product. If something happened or something crazy happened, there's easier ways to kind of manage it, to be able to track it, all that good stuff. Labels are just useful to have. Do you have to have something extravagant for when you're selling at a local farmer's market or at your own house or farm? No. But it would be good to kind of just have some basics to understand what is on a label. So if you do look up Georgia Department of Ag's food label requirements, this is what you're going to see. I would point out allergen declaration and things like that are good to also kind of include. If you're going to sell to retail or wholesale, things like that, you will definitely need a label. But like I said, for end consumer, you don't have to actually have it. So now I'm going to get into the actual meat of this presentation. It took me a long time to figure out how I wanted to approach this. And the best way for me to think about selling honey would be going back to the basics of the 4 Ps. And I don't know if I'm sure some of y'all have heard of this, if not almost all of y'all. But if y'all haven't heard of the 4 Ps, basically these are things a manager can control. So when we're honey production to sell might not be the biggest thing on your agenda or the priority of what you're doing for beekeeping. Maybe it's just a hobby. Maybe it's just to get pollinators in your area. But if you're going to sell honey, you're going to need to know about these 4 Ps. If you're going to sit down and think about this as a startup and a business plan, this is a really good place to kind of start thinking about those things and get your gears turning. But ultimately, to begin, you're going to start with the product, right? So what's our product? Honey, right? So that's first P, easy money. Second P would be price, and we're going to walk through that a little bit. So you got the right product. Now we got to get the right price. Place, you got the product and the price. Now we need the right place to sell it. And then also promotion. How are we going to advertise? How are we going to get people to buy your honey? And I'm going to be honest, honey is what I would consider a saturated market, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more as we go. But you're going to need to figure out ways to differentiate yourself from others, because you're going to have a lot of competitors. Whether or not they're when I say competitors, it's not necessarily cutthroat in the honey world, but you're going to have people that are going to have products that are similar to yours. And if you're at the same farmer's market or you're selling in the same area, you're going to want to have some sort of edge on your competition to sell your product. Now, what are you selling, right? Well, technically, the easy answer is honey, right? But the question's a loaded one, because you're not necessarily just selling honey. You're trying to sell what you can offer that someone else doesn't. Why are you different, right? So I want y'all to keep that in your mind as we go through this. And remember, great managers know how to manipulate these 4 Ps. And that's to maximize their advantage. And I really do think that's very important, especially with honey being such a saturated field. All right. So I wanted to show the product's life cycle a little bit. And this is generic product life cycle, so this isn't specific necessarily to honey. So I do want you to keep that in mind. But some basics on a product life cycle: you're going to have introduction. That's your low sales, low growth. The characteristics on each one of these are listed as we advance through the lifespan, so you can see how they change. But the introduction phase, like I said, is characterized by low sales, growth, profit, very few competitors, okay? But as the product grows and progresses, you're going to have growth phase, sales increase. Rapid growth is seen when cost starts coming down and competitors start emerging. Maturity, though, is the longest phase. So this is the phase where the product will the sales will be high, the profits will be consistent, cost reduction becomes a focal point of your product at that point. And then market share battles are beginning to be waged. So how are you competing against your other direct competition? And then finally, the product enters a decline stage. So not all products go through the stages of the product life cycle the same. It's not always the same. There's not a set time. So it's worth mentioning that there are no set timeframes for this. So your product might last a lot longer in maturity or introduction or growth, just depending on where you're at and what your end goal and how you're approaching your product. So I did want to kind of give you that as like a visual of how a product cycle goes. Now, when it comes to the product, the first P, right, it's probably the most, I'd say it's arguably one of the most important, because without a product, you have nothing to sell, right? So when answering this question of what we would be selling, it can be difficult to answer that when you're thinking about more than just honey. So I like I said, it's kind of like a saturated market, kind of like barbecue sauce, right? So you're creating value to a product that is to essentially to help that product prosper in a market where really there's a lot of other substitutes, right? So you really want to create this value, okay? And we call it a value bundle. And that's a mix of tangible and intangible benefits that your customers receive. Okay, so for example, organic certification, sustainable packaging. These are things that even the story behind your bees can add value. So I know that when I talked about traceability a second ago, get your story out there if you're going to want to market this honey, right? The QR codes are game changer. Keep records so people know where that honey is coming from, and now they can tie that honey to a person, right? You're trying to sell to people. You're selling a product to people, but you want to make sure that they feel connected to that product. So you are a great way to connect the dots for folks. And it's becoming a consumer trend and want to know where their food comes from, where they want to know the people behind the food. And so this is a really good way to do that. Organic certification, like I said, and sustainable packaging mean something to different people. So knowing your audience, knowing your target audience will play a big role in this, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So I do want to mention in this photo here, I put a screenshot. This is from the Flavor of Georgia. This is a honey that won the competition. They do have a honey entrance into this competition. It's a honey showcase. And they actually won with this garlic hot honey really kind of a topping is kind of how they marketed it. They marketed it as a topping for pizza, and they did a really good job of pairing it. So that's another way you can really add value is, okay, your honey might have a certain type of taste to it. How does that pair? What does that pair well with? What kind of food does it go with? What can I as a consumer use that product for? But I did want to give a shout out to Flavor of Georgia. Winners have went on to have increased businesses due to this exposure. You actually do get to put that little image on there on your product saying, hey, I won Flavor of Georgia. Over 1,800 products just like this one have been launched since 2007 because of this competition. So if you're interested in being something different to and really developing your honey product a step further than selling the basic honey, Flavor of Georgia is really good, but there's also UGA Food Pick. I want to throw a plug in for them. It's a good place to look, and that's Food Pick, P-I-C. They're the ones that actually work with this product to get it to where it is, to get it to be shelf stable, to get it to the right taste for the person that was actually developing that. So they work with the honey producer to develop this product and to make it what they want it to be. So I do want to encourage you to check those two out, Flavor of Georgia and Food Pick. They're great resources through UGA. All right, so total product is more than just the honey, right? We've established that. The total product that you're selling is not just a tangible item, but it's a plan or a path. The image here kind of shows the evolution of that breakdown for the total product concept. You start to see, you start with generic, and then you kind of upgrade there to expected for market sale. It's your base product with minimums, features and services. You got your value added product. That's that step above just selling basic honey, right? This is when we're starting to get into licensing. When you get to that value added product, we need to make sure we're doing all that we're supposed to from a licensing standpoint at that point. You start to diversify a little bit when you get to that part. So as your business grows, your products will start to grow. This can definitely become extremely overwhelming, but think of it like a natural evolution of your business. So a better way to look at it is like this. So this version to me is a little less stressful as a person that's coming in and I'm trying to start a business or try to sell this product. You're expected to have the generic product and the expected product. All right, that's your basic honey. That's your selling your honey, right? Your extra credit would be value added, doing that hot honey, doing something that's adding value to that product, whether that's pairing different pairings of the different honeys with foods, with cheese boards. You know, charcuterie is a big thing these days. Learning what honey goes well with different cheeses. Great way to do some extra credit stuff, right? And then where the firm has to be headed. So potential product. When I'm thinking about this, if I'm just doing this as a hobby, I might not be at this point. I might not be thinking potential product. But what you could be thinking is, where do I want to go? Is there an opportunity for me to maybe sell this in a bigger means or bigger fashion? Maybe there is a local retailer that'll take my local honey. There's different options, right? So potential product, think of it like the potential, the future for where you're wanting to go. So market segmentation, we talked about how to target those. We said the organic and the sustainable packaging means something to different people, right? And that's true. When you think about market segmentation, this is the process of dividing a broad target market into smaller groups. All right. And if you're starting to try to just dabble in selling a product, this can get also very overwhelming with how many outlets you could go to sell a product. All right. There are so many people out there, right? So you can use different segmentation to kind of filter out what you want to do. So first off, obviously geographic. Okay. You hear a lot of the buzzwords like local, right? What's local mean? What does local mean? Local means literally whatever you want it to be, right? So if I'm buying a product from if I say US made versus something made in China, guess what? US made to me could be local in my eyes, even though it's national. A local could be just your city, just your county. Local means a lot of things. So you can see that word a lot and people use it a lot. Okay. So certain aspects to consider there, but also when you're thinking about your honey directly, you can also think about food preferences in your area, the regional taste of your area, or climate related needs. For instance, certain honey flavors might be more popular in specific regions. I know if you're near Savannah area and if you wanted to take your honey to the next level and try to sell to like some of these restaurants and things, they might want a certain honey taste, right? So making sure that you're catering, if that's your direction that you're going, making sure you're catering to that clientele. Then you also have demographics. So you've got age, income, education even. So, and I want to frame this by saying, y'all are here because y'all are interested in this, right? So y'all already have an idea of what this is, where your honey comes from, how it's made, just an inkling, right? There's a lot of people that don't know that. Okay, so education could play a role depending on how you approach selling your product. Younger consumers might want more of that sustainable and organic piece, while affordability might appeal to some of the lower income. So if you're in a lower income area, that's something to think about when it comes to pricing your product, and we'll talk about that a little bit too. But if you already know you're up against a lower income households in your area, you might not want to make a product that's a premium product that you're selling for a lot of money. Making it more affordable could be a way to kind of get more people in your area interested in your product. Operating segmentation. So this kind of targets customers based on the type of commodity or specific need from the industry they belong to. So for instance, I talked about those restaurants. They might actually want honey in bulk, right? Whereas farmers markets, they're wanting more of a smaller 8-ounce, 12-ounce package of honey rather than a big giant 2-gallon jug of honey. So some other things to consider when it comes to market segmentation, for an effective market segmentation, there's 3 criteria that we must meet, right? So it's got to be measurable. So the segment should be quantifiable with data. And I know that's like, what? I'm collecting data now. When I say that, it's their size and potential. So if you know in your area, and a lot of this, if you're plugged into your communities and things, this is super easy to figure out. It's not as high tech as you think it is. You're just trying to figure out what the size and potential for your area is, right? So if that's the number of folks living in a certain amount of area that you're going to sell your product in, whatever the case may be, and whether there's a chance for growth. So like I know MC was talking about we're losing land a lot to residential and things like that. Maybe it's the potential for growth. Maybe there is a new market that's coming in because of that growth there, right? Then you've got to have it's got to be big enough to actually worth targeting. So you don't want a niche market or a niche segment that's so small that you're not going to make any money, right? And I get it. We might not be in it for all the money, but what we are in it for is maybe at least a return on investment, right? That's what I want to make sure that y'all are aware of. So you want to make sure that the segment is large enough to be able to put that time and effort into targeting. And then finally, actionable, right? So you must be able to develop strategies and campaigns to reach these segments. So you should be able to say, okay, if I'm targeting a population that's anywhere from 25 to 35 years old, guess what? There's ways to figure out campaigns to reach those segments, such as social media. So Facebook analytics, Instagram, all those things can actually cater to your demographic that you're looking for. So you can actually set that up if you went on Facebook and had like say it's Bob's Honey, right? Bob's Honey is a Facebook page now. You can actually set that up to target a demographic that's specific to what you're wanting. So if that's young folks, if that's older folks, lower income, Facebook can populate and kind of target certain folks to reach out to or to inspire them to come back and give you a follow, right? So by segmenting the market effectively, you can actually tailor your product offerings a little bit better. You can market better. You can price better. And then that ultimately leads to maximizing your profitability. That's ultimately what we're trying to achieve here. So strategic market plan, we want to also think about positioning. This determines how your product or service stands out in the minds of your customers. So there's 2 key strategies I want to talk about. One is competitive advantage, and the other is differential advantage, right? So competitive advantage, that's arising when a business excels at one thing better than another, whether that's product quality, pricing, or customer service, right? What sets you apart as the best of the best compared to your competitor, all right? In honey production, you might achieve cost leadership as an option by streamlining your operations to reduce production costs. So if they're in layman's terms, is your cost of production cheaper than your competitors? If so, now you have a competitive advantage, right? This enables you to offer lower prices. And we'll talk about a little bit more of that in just a second with price setting. But especially when it comes to consumers that are price sensitive. So what I mean by that is when we think about areas where it's low income, right? They're going to be way more price sensitive to you increasing costs of a product that you're selling. So if honey, if you went up from $6 a bottle to $10 a bottle, those folks in the low income could be extremely price sensitive, and that could completely take them off your market for wanting to buy your product. So understanding what you have an advantage of is really key for this, okay? The second strategy is differential advantage, and that focuses on offering something unique. So for honey producers, this could involve making selling your honey, marketing it as raw honey, organic, infused with different flavors like lavender, orange blossom honey. I love cotton honey. I'm a sucker for that because I love working with cotton. So if I see cotton honey, odds are I'm gonna buy that over any other type of honey because I'm like, I love cotton. I'm gonna support that, right? And I do like the taste of cotton honey too. But another example is sustainable beekeeping practices that emphasize that environmental conservation piece. And I want to go back to that QR code, that traceability. It's all about telling your story, okay? So highlighting your practices, highlighting how sustainable and environmental conscious you are can really persuade people to buy a product over another. Think about Patagonia. I don't know if any of y'all have Patagonia, but they do a lot now, whether or not their information is all the way true, I'm going to refrain, but what they do is offer a way to tell their story of how they are incorporating environmentally friendly practices into their development of their products. Same way with y'all as well. In agriculture, like I said, this is a big thing. This is becoming bigger. And there is a bit of an advantage for someone that's smaller or a smaller scale person with consumers telling your story. People can relate to that a lot easier than maybe like a box store or something like that that's showing that traceability. Now, place. Where do buyers look for your product? Okay. Are they buyers searching for honey at farmers markets? Are they local grocery store shoppers, specialty food shoppers? If you're getting really frisky, online, right? For example, locally produced raw honey might appeal more to a farmer's market, while large retailers might prefer mass-produced honey of a certain type for grocery shelves. It just depends on where you're selling your product, right? And there's a lot of pros and cons. Some of the easiest outlets are either door-to-door, farmer's market, but I will put a little asterisk there. Depending on your farmer's market, they could have different regulations. Even though that cottage food is not a requirement to have honey to sell honey, they might require some things like that. So just be aware of what your farmer's market's rules and regulations are if you choose to go that route. If you're looking for a store to sell in, what kind of store? Depending on your type of honey. So if you had organic honey, maybe a health food store. Right? And I'm not telling y'all these are the places you should or should not sell to, but these are just ideas of places you could sell to. And then the question comes, how can you access the right distribution channels? Well, to determine that, for example, you could partner with grocery stores through local distributor programs or establish a direct sales system for farmers markets. Really getting in touch with where you're wanting to sell this is the best thing. So if you're door to door, knowing who's around you that you're selling to, their preferences, what they like, dislike, that's super critical. Same thing with farmers markets, learning, what the consumers are wanting, knowing how much of your product you should have on hand at all times, things like that. As you're going through, you're going to figure out what you need to do for that distribution channel and what might not work as well. Now, I talked about, just starting out, you're not going to have much help more than what you got around you right now, right? So they really want to make sure that you're not jumping the gun too quick. There's a lot of times big box stores, especially in local, like smaller towns, maybe it's your local grocery store. They're like, oh, we want your product on our shelf. Well, that's great. But remember to think about where you're at in terms of your own production and can you meet that? You don't want to add unnecessary stress to yourself by overcommitting or doing something that you're not ready to do yet, where you're scaling, right? Upscaling too much, too quick. And then finally, what do your competitors do? Sorry. And how can you differentiate? So if you sell at a grocery store, you do not really get to set price, right? So just remember that. But if you sell at a farmer's market, door to door at your house, you are now the price setter, not the price taker. So you cut out a lot of the middleman too if you're selling direct to consumers, and you hold basically all the power. And that's a good thing, and it can be a bad thing at times, but I do want you to realize that where you're selling does impact how much control over your product you're going to have. Now I'm going to ask y'all a question. All right, this is called the Girl Scout cookie problem. All right, I love Girl Scout cookies. My favorite's the Samoa. It's delicious. All right, we're going to do a little role-playing game. All right, you're a California Girl Scout. And you want to sell a lot of cookies. Where should you set up shop? I want y'all to give me an idea. Where would y'all, if you were a Girl Scout, where would you want to set up your cookies at? Y'all can unmute and tell me, give me a location.
I'm from California and we sold ours outside the grocery store, just like everybody else.
Grocery store. That's great, right? Just like everybody else. I love that you said that. Now, what if? What if I told you there was a place that you might not have thought of? All right. When I think Girl Scouts, I might not think of of an untraditional location just because I'm used to Walmart. I'm used to going out and seeing them at the table, getting what I want, getting my Samoas, getting my Thin Mints, and going on with my business. And considering that grocery shopping, even though really I just came there for the cookies. Now, what if I told you a dispensary, marijuana dispensary, a hemp dispensary in these states that it's legal in? Maybe I would have approached this a little differently. If I was a Girl Scout, I might have set up shop outside of that. And I ain't saying they all got the munchies, but they could. And if they do, guess what? Your Girl Scout's going to win the award for the most cookies sold. It might have only went to one person, but they're going to buy them all. Okay. There's actually a study that showed that there was an increase in sales for Girl Scouts in California and in Colorado. I don't have it on here, that they were selling outside of dispensaries, and it worked, right? So sometimes the point of this whole thing is sometimes unorthodox approaches yield the best results. All right. It creates an advantage that you didn't even know existed. It's easy to overlook this because I'm going to be honest, if you're in a state like Georgia, it's illegal. I don't know if you've ever been around people probably twice my age, but if you mention anything about marijuana around these parts, that it's not a topic that's necessarily the first thought in their head when they're thinking Girl Scout cookies. Okay. So it could be that it takes that little bit of thinking outside the box to really hit home runs. Okay. So we're going to get into more of the math, and I promise you this math is not hard as we go. So if you have questions, or if you'll be able to, I can always send this out to as a PDF. So if y'all want to go back and look at this, but when we're talking about pricing, how do you price, right? And can it be too high? Can it be too low? Should you price the same as the market rate? And I'll tell you, it depends on the industry, depends on the product, and it depends on where you're at. And I know that's a lot of variables, but for example, when it comes to clothing, okay, especially if you're if you're like me growing up, I got these Southern like preppy T-shirts and polos almost across the board. It's a standard price, right? Brand to brand. Southern Tide, Southern Marsh, eventually they all caught up to about the same. And and there might be a plus or minus of $10, okay? But at the end of the day, they're really kind of uniform across the board. Now, as a honey, from a food standpoint, that doesn't always seem to be the case. But from a clothing standpoint, a lot of people do that. They like to set their price about the same as the market competition, especially if they want to set themselves up to be to have some sort of thought from a consumer. When they think of your product, they're thinking quality, they're thinking high end, something like that. You might want to set them at the same price, but there are ways to think about how to go about it. So pricing for honey can depend. Ultimately, it depends on your cost of production. So only you can know that. All right. So you've got to know your costs. All right. But there's also some little bits of tricks that you can use, such as like local, or if you do an organic, you can't call it organic unless it is, but if you do organic, that is also a tool to use that can make your price be a little bit higher on the higher end side. Local, you can buy for some farmers markets. It does drive the price a little up, being a local product. But you always want to make sure at the end of the day, you're covering your costs and provide a reasonable profit margin. Okay. Can you price it too high? Yes, you definitely can. And it can deter customers, especially if you perceive your honey to be similar to competitors. So remember, perception and reality. The way I perceive my product is obviously going to be good. I'm going to want it to be the highest quality honey, and I'm going to make sure my honey beats your honey all day long. But a consumer might look at it like, okay, that's honey in a jar. That's another honey in a jar. I'm going to choose the one that's lowest cost, right? You got to think sometimes like the consumer that you're purchasing from, or that is purchasing from you. So for instance, you price a 16-ounce jar for $25, but your competitors offer similar products for $15. Well, customers might not see that $25 as a value of saying that your product's better. They might say, okay, hey, y'all are the same exact thing. The only difference is cost. I'm going to go with the other one, unless you differentiate in some form or fashion. Branding also can matter with this, but we're not going to go into that. But how you showcase your product can also matter. And I got to speed up because I'm going way too long. But some other things to think about: should your price be the same as your competitor? Not necessarily. Like I said, if competitors sell regular honey for $10 and you have and that's a non-local. So if you're selling in your county and there's somebody that's coming in that's selling from 2 or 3 counties over, you can coin local because you're from there. You can get a little higher price, right? Just because your bees are, in my case, are Effingham County bees, I might pay a little bit more because I know my bees are from my county, right? Just that sense of pride. But you can also undercut, and I'll talk about that pricing strategy in just a second as we go through. Due to time, I'm going to not walk through the math example. I will send that out, but I have kind of outlined how to go about setting your prices for each jar. And so I walked through that. So I'm going to send that out to y'all to let y'all walk through, just because I don't want to take too much of our time. So the final few things I want to talk about is choosing target margins. So when we're talking about building this pricing model or this price, you want to have a margin you want, right? So for instance, a good benchmark is about a 20% profit margin when it comes to food. Okay, when you get into clothes and stuff like that, your profit margin is like 400%. It's like insane. Like your profit margin is through the roof, and it can go as high as you want. But when it comes to food, it's a little different. A lot of times, margin for food is only about a 20%. If you ever hear people say, some folks that are not attached to the farm or not attached to agriculture might think farmers make a lot of money, but at the end of the day, their profit margins are super duper tiny. And so that's the same concept here. Your profit margins really don't need to be that high because they're not going to be that high unless you're producing a lot, right? So when you're smaller scale or just starting, it's going to be small. It's going to be a smaller profit margin. 20% is a good place to go with that. All right, adapting for margins for lower vol or for higher volume, higher margins for small orders. You can have variable pricing margins there. It just depends on how big you and how you want to approach your business. And then you can even have just maybe not publicly share with everyone unless you're doing that big box store. But you can even have a margin you refuse to go under. I'm not going under 15%, right? So you have that in your head. So in case you go into even our local gas stations have started selling local honey. So, I mean, you go to any of these little retail outlets to sell that honey, you're going to need to know that in your head because you're going to want to be able to play ball or not play ball with these folks. Target margins do help you balance that profitability and competitiveness, and it tailors your margins to different consumer segments. So pricing strategies, there are a ton of pricing strategies available out there that you could read up on, talk about. One I want to bring up is this penetration pricing. So that's setting a very low price to gain entry. So when we're talking saturation, you're going to need to make a name for yourself pretty right off the bat. All right, whether that's setting a lower price, whether that's the brand of it, whether that's a catchy saying, whether that's a new variety or a new flavor in your area. Maybe you are bringing cotton honey up to North Georgia and that's the first time they've ever seen it in your area. Guess what? You have a penetration pricing capability and you can kind of set that a little different. You can also do some different pricing when it comes to competitive. That's where you're setting up against your competitors. At the end of the day, you're going to want to know what your competitor is selling for. You don't have to match it and you don't have to upcharge yours to be better, but it does make it a little bit better to kind of understand what you're up against. Then you got value-based pricing. That's where you're going into your organics. You're getting into your local. You're getting into your Georgia grown, your flavor of Georgia. That just having those things on there, your value can set a little bit of a higher price on your product. And then, of course, we just mentioned briefly about the discount pricing for volume. That's an option. Bulk orders, those are options. And then I'm going to teach y'all about one thing about one of my favorite pricing strategies I ever learned when I was going through my studies for agribusiness from undergrad and master's is this psychological pricing. And you're probably like, I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't know what the heck this means. All right. When you go to a store on Black Friday, do you see Black Friday price $10 or do you see $9.99? Right? Brought down to $8.99. Guess what? In your head, $9.99, I'm more likely to buy that at $9.99 than at $10. And I'm gonna stand on that hill and say it was a great, great purchase. I saved money. I made a deal. I stole this thing. But in reality, it was 1 cent difference. But I'm more likely to buy it because of the way it looks and the way my brain processes it. It's more appealing. So there's a lot of stuff on the psychological stuff pricing that you can look up, but that's an example of it. I also want to mention prestige. So with honey, I think of it like the jar it's going to be packaged in or the container could matter here, right? So if you're in a really nice, pretty glass jar that you're selling in, you might be selling that thing for $20. If you're in just a regular plastic squeeze bottle, you ain't going to get necessarily $20 for that, right? So that's your prestige. It's setting a higher price to convey an exclusivity of the product or a quality, an added quality to it. Okay, so I got 2 more slides. I'm gonna be done. I'm gonna let y'all have it back to question Cliff and MC. So promotion, the last few pieces here. This is an important part of selling something, and a lot of people overlook it. Even companies overlook this piece. This is what you think of when you think of marketing. This is the fun part of marketing. This is advertising. This is social media. This is engagement with your consumers, okay, with your customer bases. So some different ways to do that. All right, you've got social media. Showcase your product. Videos and photos are great. Engage with your audience. Reply to comments, answer questions, create polls to kind of see what they're wanting. Maybe they want a new flavor of honey. Maybe they want an adaptation of how to use your honey. Collaborate with influencers. There are a lot of influencers. If you've got high school age folks near you, odds are they're going to claim that they are an influencer. And guess what? They will do things and put videos on TikTok and Instagram, and they will sell your product for you without you even having to lift a finger. And all they got to do is sometimes do a dance in the background with your honey up in the front, right? So collaborate with folks that are local. Run promotions and giveaways. During the holidays, honey is a great gift for people, right? That's a great opportunity to run different kind of promotions. Run a contest where you can tag in friends for a chance to win a jar of your honey. Things like that work. Other avenues, partner with your farmers market and events, local events to promote your honey. Email marketing, so build a listserv. It's super easy to have like a little email sign up at any of your stands or anything that you're selling. Have a little card that has a QR that tells you about signing up. Storytelling and branding, I've hit on that a bunch. And then finally, collaboration. Partner with other local businesses. And specifically, if you play the game right, so you don't need a cottage food, partner with somebody that's got a cottage food and let them use your honey in their products and then co-market, co-brand it, right? So those are just some of the creative ways to cross-promote different things there. So different uses for your honey. I know that was a lot and I went over by like 10 minutes, but I wanted y'all to have an idea of how you can even get going with selling your honey, making a little bit of money on the side. And I'll be happy to take any questions if there are any at this moment.
Hey, Blake.
Yes, sir.
Before people start leaving the Zoom / in person, when we finish questions, I've got quite a few beekeeping tools that I think everybody should have in a beekeeping bag that I'll go over. And so anybody who wants to hang around and look at that, when we finish questions, I'll do that. So just want to put that out there.
Awesome. And we will, I will go ahead and say we'll have some resources and we'll send out the link to the recording. And I'll send my presentation, like I said, out to y'all. So y'all will be getting an email from either myself or MC or Cliff one with all this stuff on it. So y'all will have it for later if y'all need it. Any questions for me before we turn it over? Awesome. All right, Cliff, what you got?
All right, so feel free to stop me at any point. All right, So when you go to a beehive, you need a bag, okay? You need a bag to store and keep all of your stuff that you're gonna take to the hive. There's lots of little things that you won't grab every time you go. Get you a bag. This is a Harbor Freight special. It's like 20 bucks on sale on the weekend. All right, next. Bee suits. There are multiple types of bee suits. There are jackets. You can go with no suit. That's your choice. It's not mine. There are different types of hoods that go on your head. Some look like a sombrero. Some look like this. That's just your choice. I will say, you get what you pay for in a suit. I've gotten to where I buy the more expensive suits. By the way, there's a bee on this one. I buy a little more expensive suits now, and when a bee gets inside of it, I look at it really closely and probably chunk it once I start getting bees inside. I started that last year after I got stung in the face. So, you can get ventilated suits or non-ventilated suits. It is Georgia. It gets hot in the summertime. If you go non-ventilated suits in July, you take a very good chance of having a heat stroke. Please keep that in mind. Same thing with gloves. I prefer goatskin gloves. They're my preference. These are ventilated here. For some reason, the yellow canvas gloves that come in all starter beehive kits, I always get stung way more times. I think there's a scent to them or something. So I just throw that out there. I meant to go over this in my presentation, and I think that I hid one of the slides that I didn't mean to hide. So we were talking about when MC was talking small hive beetles. So this is a beetle blaster trap. Small, clear at the bottom, black at the top. It fits down between the frames in the hive. So you've got two frames. It sits on the top of the frames just like this. The bees run the beetles into the trap. The trap has beetle trap oil in it. You can also mix your own concoction to go in there if you choose. And then the beetles drown in the oil. Now, just a little tip. You buy these from a beekeeping company, they're like $3.30 a piece or something. If you buy them from Amazon, you can get a bulk pack and they break it down to like 50 cents a piece. Just say it. They don't last real long once they're in the hive. They're really not reusable. If you have a heavy beetle infestation, they're going to be used up pretty quick. The other thing, if you have beetle problems, MC gave several great points. The one thing that I wanted to add to, or the two things I wanted to add to that, is a hive in full sun won't have near the beetle problems that a hive in the shade has. The other thing is if you buy pool salt, bulk bags, Walmart, it's cheap. Pour it around the base of your hive, underneath your hive. It doesn't have to be super thick, but enough to poison the ground with salt. You're not necessarily leaching salt down deep into the ground. It's just like right there at the top layer. It'll act as two things. When the beetles go to the ground to pupate, they'll die because they hit the salt layer. The second thing is weeds don't grow in salt. So if you don't want to weed eat right at the base of your hive, that pool salt serves two methods. Okay, hive tools. Everybody needs a hive tool. Now, I've got two different kinds here. They're your choice. This is a smaller version of what most new beekeepers get, or not new people. New starter kits come with a shape something similar to this. However, I learned many years ago that this is my preferred hive tool. Stephanie showed me this one, and I won't go back to using one of these. So when your frames are stuck in the box, and they will get stuck, you take this hook, put it down, and use it just like a crowbar. You pry the frames out. Works miracles. I keep two in the bee bag at all times because I'm going to lay one down somewhere. And it's much easier to go grab the second one out of the bee bag and then go back and find the first one when I'm done. The other thing is, as you can see, the red has come off of this one. I have boiled them, scraped them before, and repainted the red. When you repaint the red and you've got this nice shiny red something that's laying in the tall grass, it's much easier to see. you're gonna lay it down and leave it somewhere, I promise. Or, better yet, it gets stuck underneath the outer lid on top of the inner lid. So then you're really looking for it, you don't find it till the next inspection. Bee brush, okay? They come in all sorts of types of textures, I guess is the word I'm looking for. I prefer the horsehair ones. This one's falling apart. As you can see, it is got some honey in it, so it's holding its shape. I'm probably gonna chunk this one, but if I wasn't, I could just get some really hot water, dip it down, and then let it dry. They serve multiple purposes. If you get covered with bees, you can wipe your suit. If you are going to close up the box and you've got a bunch of bees on the top of the box, you can sweep them off. Or when you're harvesting honey, if this is your honey frame, you take them, you sweep them back into the box, and then you go put this frame somewhere else, whether that's inside of another box, whether that's under a sheet, however. So that comes in handy quite regularly. A frame sorter is what I'm going to call it. I don't know exactly what you call it, but this is a 9-frame sorter. Why 9? When you asked me earlier about how many frames are in a box, I told you 10. That's right, or 8, not 9. So this sorts 9 frames. The point of this is that when I have a honey super on a box, I'm running 9 frames. I'm not running 10 frames, even though it's a 10-frame box. That gives my frames more room, or my bees more room to build more comb and put more honey into those 9 frames. This spaces them evenly. You set it here and you run it the length of, or the length of the box. So anyways, if you're running honey supers and you're going to run 9 frames, which I encourage you to do, get one of these. If you're going to run 10 frames, this doesn't do you any good. All right, so as scary as it may sound, it is not that scary to mark your queens. Why mark your queens? So you can keep up with the age of the queen. Remember I said I like to keep mine about 2 years. How do I do that? With my queen marker. So I have this queen marking cage, and as y'all can see, I hope, the plunger comes out. You let the queen walk on this right here, push it up, and your queen would be right there. You want to get her right between that mesh. So then you can just take and mark the little spot on her back and go on about your life. These are queen marking pins. Each year we kind of designate a color as beekeepers across the nation. Anybody know what color 25 is? Blue? I think it's blue. Don't hold me to that, but I think 2025 is going to be blue. Next, queen clips. Okay, they look like hair clips. The plastic ones. For many years, I used the plastic ones. The problem with them is you see how far the clips are on, or the wings of the clip that open it. If I put this in my pocket with a queen inside it, I'm likely to open this in my pocket. The metal ones are a little bit more pricey. I mean, $3 versus 10, I think. So not anything crazy. But the clips at the top are no wider than the base. So I really don't open this in my pocket. As I'm going through the hive, if I see my queen, I grab her in this clip and just hold on to her until I'm done with the hive inspection. That does 2 things. If I am going to need to make a split on the hive, I can do so because I have my queen clipped. The other thing is I know that I can't squish her if I have her in this cage. There are many different types of queen cages. These are 3 that I had on hand. A wood, that kind of plastic, and that kind of plastic. They all, or these 2 kind of work the same. You fill candy in the top. It's got a plastic cap that can go over it. You pull the plastic cap off and the bees chew through the candy. So they look, I don't know what y'all can see out there, but they look kind of like that. Then the wooden front, queen cage. Same thing, it has candy, but it has cork ends. You shove it down between the frames, pull the cork end out that has the candy in it. The bees chew through it, the queen can walk out of the cage after a couple days. There's a whole lesson on releasing queens that we're not getting to today. Pen and paper. Simple as it may sound, you're gonna need it at some point in time. And have a pen that you can write with while you're wearing gloves. That's the other thing. So you don't want to have to pull your gloves off to write something down. If you number your hives, like with a reflective piece of, like the mailbox numbers, go to your mailbox. Stick one of those on the front of your hive, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. Then as you go through your hives, you can just mark down, hive 1 is low on brood. So I know in a week, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna look for that queen, or I'm gonna look for fresh eggs, see if the queen's alive. Okay, just have a pen and paper close by. What do nails and rubber bands have in common? So, kind of a rhetorical question, but the point of finishing nails or wire nails, not finishing nails, wire nails, little bitty tiny nails, and rubber bands is that is in reference to a broken frame. So you're going through your hive, you lift up a frame, and the top comes off of the frame, the top bar. When I say the top bar, I mean this piece that literally runs across the top. It comes off. Now what? You can't put it back together. You don't want to close your hive up and leave that gap there. So you'll take a rubber band, and I hope this one doesn't break, but yeah. So if your top bar had come off, you'd run a rubber band around like that right there. Run quite a few of them. That'll give you time to close that hive up and come back and deal with it later. That's not a permanent solution, and the bees will chew through the rubber band eventually, but rubber bands are great to have. And you should also have a hammer. I don't have one in this bag today, probably because I left it sitting on a hive somewhere, but needle nose pliers, flathead, Phillips head screwdriver. You'll need them at some point in time. There's not an exact specific reason. Okay, and a sharp knife. Emphasis on sharp. You'll end up cutting a queen cell out, or you'll need to slice a pool noodle to close up a hive. You're gonna need a sharp knife. I don't mean a dull butter knife. Okay, that's pretty much it on my tools. I'm open for questions. Stick around.
Hey, would there be any way for you to take some photos of these tools and put them on a sheet for us to send out to those on virtual and everything so we can see them a little up close, a little bit better?
Yeah, I'll do that.
You the man.
Any questions here?
How much space does a hive need? Like I have 20 acres, how many hives?
Question is, how much space does a hive need? If I have 20 acres, how many hives can I run? There's not an exact number. So there is a map out there that I found on the website one day that will tell you like how many hives your particular coordinates can support. But for the most part in Georgia, I mean, I wouldn't tell you to put 550,000 hives out there, but I don't imagine that you're going to overload your 20 acres. Your bees are going to fly a pretty good radius, 3-mile radius regularly, up to 6 miles is the numbers that I've been told. So you're not controlling your bees on your land in the first place. Yes, ma'am. Okay, the question is, what is my source for bees? Where do I order them from? Let me preface this and say that I am a UGA Extension employee and I am not promoting anyone's particular business when I say this. A lot of the time you can find bees locally in your bee club. That's where I tell you to start first. I will also tell you that I order a lot of bees from Gardner's Apiaries in Baxley. Right now, their nuke boxes are $155 a piece with pickups beginning the second week of April. I've ordered quite a few new boxes to pick up that week for myself. There are other suppliers in the state of Georgia. Feel free to contact any of them. Those are just my local options. Yes.
Ants, are they a problem?
Ants. So for the most part, ants do not cause a problem in the beehive for the most part. One trick that you can do is go cut a limb off of a walnut tree and stick the leaves of the walnut tree on top of your inner lid. The bees will leave. I mean, the ants will leave, not the bees. You don't want the bees to leave. Sorry. The ants will leave. Now, if you've got ants walking all over every frame in the hive, then you've got another problem and you probably don't have enough bees in the box to begin with. If you've just got a couple around the edge on the outside of the box, I wouldn't even concern myself. Yes, ma'am.
Like right across the dirt road from a big field, or any of the pesticides that they spray, would that be concerning for the hive at all?
Question is regarding a pesticide being sprayed on a row crop field across the road. The touchy subject. What I'm going to say is this. There are pesticides that can be sprayed that are harmful to bees. Yes. We cannot produce the food that is needed without pesticides. The best thing that you can do is create a relationship with the farmer and hope that they will give you a heads up of what they're going to spray when. There are pesticides that are sprayed that are not necessarily harmful to bees. There are also situations that the bees are not going to be in that vicinity when it's sprayed. There's a whole lot of ifs there. So yes and no.
Cotton.
Okay.
There's a lot of cotton to produce in your area. But the foliage.
So the question is the defoliant for cotton being harmful for bees? That's the same answer as that, is it depends on what is used. So I ran bees on the edge of a cotton field this past summer and in the fall, and they were there on the edge of the field when they sprayed defoliant. They were there through the picking of the cotton, and the bees were fine. I made a good bit of honey off of that cotton field in Burke County. But it just all depends. Yes, sir.
Same subject, I heard, it may not be true, but like bees in Georgia or the United States are reducing drastically, like 50% in the last.
Okay, so he's asking about bees reduction of numbers of bees in Georgia and nationwide significantly. So if you're a member of Georgia Beekeepers Association, you got an email this morning or either late last night, I don't know what time it came through. Sorry. That talked about massive hive number losses in 2024 due to colony collapse disorder, which can be a number of things, and there's no, like, colony collapse disorder is not necessarily like cancer that we can say exactly what did it. There's a plethora of things that lead to colony collapse disorder. The numbers are super high, and there's a whole lot of people doing research into it. There's some numbers as high as 90% of hives lost in Georgia in 2024. So yes, the number dropped drastically in 24. It had not necessarily been dropping since the last colony collapse disorder, which was 2016, maybe? That sounds right. So yeah, yes. Yes, ma'am. Okay.
But can contain, like, there are certain places that you can, like, have it, grow certain things in a certain area, or do they just go with 365?
So can you contain your bees? Can you grow certain things to keep them in a specific area, or are they just going to fly their regular radius? You can encourage your bees to stay by planting certain things and having things that bloom, having plants that bloom year round. However, no matter how hard you try, unless you put them in the middle of a 3 mile radius and you own all 3 miles, all the way around, you can't necessarily keep them on your plot of land. But you can encourage them. Okay.
Okay, so. Say I get into big business. And in a 2.5 mile range from me, somebody else is in the big business. And we can't contain them. So if their bee box is better than my bee box, I may lose my bees. It's sort of like a dog. If you don't feed your dog, it's gonna go to another house. With the bees, I mean, if they get better flowers or something.
So
I mean, that may be silly, but I mean, I don't want to invest $500 in.
the question is, if I have bees and my neighbor 2.5 miles away has bees and they've got better flowers than I do, am I going to lose my bees? Not necessarily.
Who knows?
Your bees aren't just going to go live somewhere else because there are better flowers. There are reasons that your bees will leave the hive. And if you don't do certain things, hive maintenance type actions, then yes, you may lose your bees, but you're not necessarily losing your bees because somebody else has better flowers than you. Okay. Do we have questions out there that we need to answer?
I just wanted to piggyback off what you said about the defoliation and some of those pesticides. I would encourage you if you've got if you have hives near these fields that have cotton or other crops being produced, it's always worth talking to whoever manages those fields. A lot of times, your bees are going to help them a little bit, but knowing that, having that relationship and that talk and that conversation with them, there are times of day that are better for spraying. So if they can, work with you on when they're spraying those, and of course, farming's a little bit, you can always have a plan, but things change. But just having that conversation does help a lot. I know we got a lot of guys in Effingham that have bees near their cotton fields and things, and just knowing that they're there, how to manage them and things like that really do go a long way. But just something to think about. Like I said, I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into it, but having that conversation is always a good starting point. Cliff, there is one question I do see, and I know MC did answer it, but I'll ask it and let you, if you have any other thoughts as well. But how often do you check your hives? And then MC's answer was, depending on the time of year, extreme high and low temps are hard on bees. During strong nectar flows, checking once a week may be necessary. Cliff, do you have anything you want to add to that?
MC hit that nail on the head. During heavy nectar flow, I encourage you to look once a week for swarming or overpopulation, underpopulation, all of those items. In the wintertime, I don't want you opening your hive if it's less than 55 or so degrees. So you're not looking at them at that point in time. So the time meter is important. We go from once a week to once every 2 to 3 months, depending on weather.
Just a feed in the winter time?
What do you mean?
More or less, you're cracking them in the winter time just to provide them with the syrup they need and
yes.
Check and move on.
Yes. So during the winter time, you're really only feeding them, and ideally in that scenario, you're using a method of feeding that you're not actually cracking the inner lid.
Cliff, that's all the questions we have in the chat and online. If it's okay with y'all, I think we can kind of close her down for tonight. I know we've squeezed a lot of information into 2 sessions really quickly, But we really do appreciate everybody. And Cliff, I know you got your own set of rules over there for the folks in person. Sorry about that, y'all. I'm not the one that's going to let y'all out. But everybody else online, thank y'all for joining us in person. Thank y'all. We'll be sending y'all all this information, recordings and everything. Y'all been a great crowd and great participation. And Cliff, MC, do y'all have any final words?
Thank you all. Blake, MC, you covered your topics much better than I could have ever touched on.
Thank you, guys.
Awesome. All right. Thank y'all.